might be worth diving into the kind of the general idea of the systems view of life in understanding life this way is, well, I was going to say, is the idea of life as a kind of networked system a good place to start?
Well, before that even, I think the critical change and the critical advance is to say that the basic characteristic of life is a pattern. In the 1950s and 1960s, there were these big breakthroughs, the discovery of the structure of DNA, the genetic code, which gave rise to the whole field of molecular biology. And so when you ask, still today, when you ask biologists what is the nature of life, they would point to cells, they would point to these macromolecules, proteins, DNA, RNA, and some might just say a living system is a chemical system that contains DNA. That's all you need to know. If you look for DNA, if you find DNA, it's alive. If you don't find DNA, it's not alive. But the problem with that is that a dead organism also contains DNA, contains the very same DNA. It doesn't disappear. So any piece of wood or piece of bone has the same DNA. And so what is really the essential difference between, a living and a dead organism is the basic process of life. And this basic process of life, which sages and poets for centuries have called the breath of life, is now in science is known as metabolism. And it is defined as a ceaseless flow of energy and matter through a network of biochemical processes, which allows the system to continually regenerate and perpetuate itself. And so there are two aspects here to this concept of metabolism: the flow aspect and the network aspect. And that is the very essence of the systems view.
And so is the, I guess the concept of autopoiesis, the idea of the system being a self-generating, self-creating system, right. That's one side of this, right?
That's right. Not every network is a living network. So these networks have been studied very carefully. And, Umberto Maturana and Francisco Varela in Chile came up with this theory of autopoiesis, which means self-making, that living networks are continually self-generating. So in a cell, the simplest living network, in a cell, each of the structures of the cell, the relatively large structures, the proteins, the membranes, the DNA, the RNA, and so on, all these large molecules are continually produced by the cellular network. What comes in from the outside is food, this stream of energy and matter, small molecules, sugars and other small molecules, and then out of those constituents, the cellular network produces the larger pieces. And as soon as the larger pieces are produced, like an enzyme, for instance, it will contribute to the network, helping to produce other pieces. So there are continual production processes going on and continual recycling. And so we see that biological life continually regenerates itself. That's the basic idea of autopoiesis. And so this is a big breakthrough because, first of all, it's a shift of emphasis from structures to patterns. And of course, I should say, in order to really understand how a cell works, you need to know the biochemistry. It's not enough to say it's a self-generating network. You have to ask, what are the production processes? What kind of molecules are involved? What kind of chemistry is involved? So that's all still valuable. But that alone, the chemistry alone, doesn't give you the answer to the essence of life. The essence of life is the pattern of self-generation. And this pattern of continual regeneration requires this flow of energy. So the flow aspect is absolutely necessary, because something that continually regenerates itself and recycles its components needs to be fed from the outside, cannot survive in a vacuum. And so the flow aspect is partly, part of it. And so the concept of metabolism combines those two. I learned this from the great microbiologist Lynn Margulis, who would say, if you ask whether something is alive, she would say, look whether it metabolizes. If it metabolizes, it's alive. If it doesn't metabolize, it's not alive. So that's a very, and I think that's for lay people, that's a good way of understanding life, because we all know about metabolism. We have the experience of being able to survive only when we breathe and eat and drink and so on. So that's common experience, and that's true for life at all levels of life.